Us on this beautiful, beautiful Saturday afternoon. My name is Imani Moise. I'm a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and as of yesterday, co-chair of the Business Journalism Task Force here at ABJ. Thank you. So I'm so excited to be here with this panel of fabulous media professionals and entrepreneurs to talk about, how to strike it out on your own and start your own business, especially as someone who's covered I spent my career covering business. I completely understand the value of ownership, equity, all of these buzzwords in terms of when it comes to building wealth and setting yourself up for long-term success. So I guess without further ado, if I could just have my panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. If you could talk a little bit about your background in business journalism and what is the company that you founded?
I guess we'll go this way.
Yeah.
All right. My name is Diane King-Hall. In terms of my background within the business news space, what I do now is I started a company this year, actually. I actually have had a company before, but I didn't approach it the right way. We'll get into that later. So my new business this year is DKH Media, because I couldn't think of anything else in terms of a name. It's a personal finance media company. What I do with that is twofold. I do a combination of personal finance workshops and teaching, and actually still working in media as an on-air anchor reporter. In terms of my career journey, I started out in the business a little more than 20 years ago at Bloomberg, so I cut my teeth there. I quickly went freelance from there. Working for a production company. I did a show for PBS affiliates. The reason why Bloomberg, I had interviewed at a few places, MSNBC, New York One, and Bloomberg. MSNBC did not pay because it was basically an internship. New York One paid very low, and Bloomberg paid the most, so it was the money. That was why. And I remember thinking at the time, I'll do this for now. But I fell in love with it. Along the way, I've made stops at CNN, New York One, CBS, Yahoo Finance. So, and I've been a client. I consider Schwab Network. I knew Renita before Schwab, but I consider Schwab a client of mine and not an employer. So that's basically kind of the summary of my journey.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm Bernadette Adams Davis, and I will say right off the bat, I am the person up here with the least amount of business journalism experience, more than 20 years ago, maybe more. I started my journalism career, my aspiration was to be a newspaper reporter, and I started with an internship at the Atlanta Journal and Constitution in my favorite city where I now live again. Worked at the Greenville News in South Carolina, a daily newspaper there, and thought I was at the end of my journalism career when I worked at the Orlando Business Journal a few years later. Started working in PR and then went briefly back into journalism, working for WFTV, the ABC affiliate in Orlando, as their website producer in 2000, 2001, so a long time ago in web years. I now own a company that I first named for myself, Bernadette Davis Communications, but that has grown, and we rebranded to the BBC Strategy Group. This is our 10th year of operation. We are a PR and integrated communications company working with Fortune 100 companies down to organizations as small as local nonprofits. And between that journalism career and starting my company, I worked for with Cox Communications, the Florida A&M University College of Law, and Walt Disney World Resort, among other places. And so that's a little bit of my journey. I'll answer some more things through the questions.
Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Renita Young. I'm an award-winning broadcast financial journalist and a Chicagoan. Welcome to my city. Thank you for coming. And so a lot of my career has been made in creating shows out of concepts that I've had. Right, so I never got the local television job outside of grad school, but I created a show wherever I went. And a lot of it was around business, personal finance, entrepreneurship. And so I had the great fortune of having worked for three of the largest business news networks in the world, most recently Schwab Network, Bloomberg TV and radio, where I hosted a couple of shows, one on personal finance and one on Black business, more so the entrepreneurship part of it and the C-suite executive part of it. And that even gave me pretty cool perspective into the intersection of culture and commerce and how it impacts Black business, Black world, Black commerce. And so I like to say that fear actually motivated me to get into business news, because when I graduated from undergrad in 2008, the impending financial downturn was coming. And so I was in a panic. I was like, well, what do I do about, paying off college loan debt? I want to buy a house one day. What's going to happen with retirement? I need to buy a car, things like that. Those things are collectively personal finance. I didn't know the term then, but I would later on, when I would take a personal finance course, do the ugly cry looking at my budget for the first time, and then teach that course years later. So it was a lot about what I did not know that motivated me to get into this business, and really just motivated me to share it with other people as well. Now, how it became an entrepreneurial venture for me is quite interesting, because I learned years ago that I wanted to insulate myself from some of the ills of this industry. I have been a part of layoffs before, and that's not a great feeling to not have a backup plan. And so I promised myself that I was gonna build something that couldn't be taken away from me at some point. Because a lot of times, if you help build it, maybe it can be taken away from you, but if you own it, it can't be taken away from you. So that was my decision to create the Vocale group, which, guys, is literally created out of all the things that I was doing for free on the side while I was at a job that didn't allow me to get paid outside of the company. And it's made of 3 specific things: voiceover work and live announcing. The second part is giving employee resource group workshops, also keynote addresses, which I have 3 signature talks. They each have workbooks tied to them. And then the last part of it is media training. Since I now have 17 years in the business, I'm able to inform media training in a different way for those of us who are not familiar. So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, so if we could back up for a minute and talk about why we're here. Part of the conception of this panel was this idea that, very few young journalists really say, I want to be a business journalist when I grow up. And even fewer Black young journalists, have this career track in mind. But what I found is that so many people, once they kind of stumble into business journalism, not only do they stay in it, they end up loving it. So from my perspective, covering personal finance, I know has changed not only the way that I approach my job, but the way I approach my own personal finances, right? And the ways that I talk to my friends and my family about their finances, right? So I guess if I could kick it back to my panel, so how did your experience covering money change the way or influence the way that you approach starting a business, whether it comes to fundraising or networking?
I guess I'll start with kind of so I'm going to take this a little slightly differently. Not so much fundraising or networking, but the application of what I was learning. It didn't apply initially when I started out in business news. It was like, doctor, excuse the analogy, not taking the medicine that was good for you. Hearing all this stuff and, sharing it as well, but not applying it to my own life until I had my come to Jesus moment where I recognized all the debt I had, and I was actually working freelance at the time, and that's probably when I had my first iteration of my company, but I didn't see myself as a company. I was like, oh, I'll just do this again for now. And I didn't see the benefit that Renita talks about ownership. So again, I'm approaching things differently now. And I remember having this thought, maybe I'm supposed to be broke the rest of my life. And this is a business journalist. And I think because a lot of probably people in our community can relate to the experiences. If you look statistically speaking, we, as a class, Black people, I mean, don't come from wealth in the same way like mainstream America, you know. Even statistically speaking now, yes, there's been some growth, but you know, our metrics are different than white America. And I remember, people of faith will get this, I remember hearing a voice say, "Who told you that?" I knew it was God. And I was like, oh. And that was the first instance where I thought, maybe I'm not. So I did start approaching things differently on a freelance basis at that time, just hustling more and negotiating more. And that was just negotiating with like creditors. And then if I wasn't incorporated at that time, I think I incorporated myself, and I just hustled money and networked to find opportunities, you know. Now it's different where I look for clients. So I'll stop myself now. I don't know if you want to take this.
So I haven't had to fundraise for my business, so that's not been something I've explored, but I will take the networking path. You know, all of my journalism work, including when I was at the Business Journal, you have to build a network, and you're doing your research to understand that story that, you know, when I was a daily newspaper reporter may have been assigned to me at 9:30. I remember a specific story about collateralized mortgage obligations, and there was a big scandal around that. That is something, as a 20-something-year-old reporter in South Carolina, I knew nothing about when it was assigned to me at 9:30 in the morning. But I had a story due by that afternoon, and someone who was an investment advisor who I was going to be interviewing. That kind of skill, and that has helped me in my business life. And I really didn't think of it this way until a couple of years into the business, that ability to hear a concept, a trend, get a call from a potential client, and to just go deep on your research before you start talking to them, even before you get the business. So that's a skill that I use a lot. And even as you get ready for networking, I am a natural introvert. So me going into a room of new people, I probably have looked up some of the people in the room before I get there. That is helpful for me. And so I do that research to understand the people in the organization. I didn't have to do that with NABJ because I'm a former NABJ member and local officer, but with other groups, I do that. And that research really helps me as a business owner to ask people questions, right? You all are great at asking questions that are relevant to them, and that's a door opener for us. And so those are some of the kinds of concepts that I still keep with me, and I believe have really helped me as a business owner.
Wall Street guys barely knew what those mortgage CMOs were anyway.
That's how we got what we got.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I will say, don't go back and read my stories. Let's not delve into my stories, but they were edited.
Yeah. I got so captured with the stories of my panelists, I forgot the question. So can you please repeat the question, Imani?
It was, how did your experience as a business journalist influence the way that you went about either like starting your business, whether that be networking, fundraising, or anything else?
Okay, so networking, and this one you guys are gonna love. My sources became my clients. I had a whole list of people who I had already grown relationships with, gained trust with. And honestly, when I was doing more entrepreneurial type of work, I would stay on the phone a little bit, stay on the Zoom a little bit longer with them and ask them questions that really didn't have much to do with what I was interviewing them about. And many of them would go, okay, I hear a little something. When you're ready to jump, call me and I'd be happy to work with you. And so I was fortunate in that I never really went to my sources asking for stuff for me. And so I think that's part of the reason why they were so willing to go, hey, listen, let me connect you with this person or that person. Or I tell one, I recently met with Breakfast for about an idea, and it's like, oh, I know someone who might be able to help with that. So that the networking part of it for me was seamless because of that.
Just really quickly to do the fundraising part. So I haven't fundraised per se. So where my streams come from are either through the media work or the personal finance workshops. I have a podcast. That's kind of what I do. That's what I want to monetize. I haven't really monetized that yet. I did get an investor this year out of the blue. It was a friend who I did not ask for it. And I hear that with a lot, and you know, you may be more familiar with this since you've been in the entrepreneurial space longer, the running a business space longer, that a lot of times it's your friends and family who will start out supporting you. So I just wanted to address that fundraising piece.
Of course, and I guess one more thing to add in case there's anyone out there thinking about launching their own business is something that I learned covering small business owners is never, ever, ever, I mean, self-funding is okay. Self-funding is okay. But you should know that Black entrepreneurs self-fund at a much, much higher rate than white entrepreneurs. Actually, than entrepreneurs of any other race, right? So if you're going to self-fund, what you need to do is make sure that you have that money separate. Say you have $500 and you have that $500 to start your business, make sure you keep track of where that money goes, right? Because if you commingle your expenses early on, then liability things can come in, but we've got
And if I can, I want to just double down on that. Yes to that. And one of the best examples of why not to do that, even if you just are doing something on the side, is during the pandemic and the PPP loans. Mm-hmm. There were people who had been running businesses, and I remember being on a call with a couple of them for years, longer than I had, but their funds were still commingled. They were still being paid only as 1099s, and so it was harder for them to do those applications, more work for them to do. And I was so thankful, again, you know, finance was not my area, that I had previously hired an accounting firm. My understanding of that data was not very strong, but I had it. And it meant that within one afternoon, I was able to do those applications. So there are also opportunities that you will come up. You see people applying for grants and different opportunities where you need those financials, and having the separate business financials makes it faster, and in some cases is the only way that you can apply for and achieve those milestones. So if you're even thinking of starting a business, start now, separate those finances.
I guess to that point, what's a 1099?
So now I'm answering tax questions. Again, check your work, check my work. So it's, if you are a contractor, so I have a full-time team, so I have full-time employees. We also use contractors. My full-time employees, if you have a full-time job, you get a W-2 from your employer. My company issues W-2s to my full-time employees. 1099s are contractors, so they get that different document, and then they are being paid based on being contractors rather than being full-time employees. But you also can end up being a contractor to companies. So when I first started, there were companies paying Bernadette Davis as a contractor to them. Those companies, and some of those companies we still work with, are now paying Bernadette Davis Communications LLC. We have a federal tax ID number rather than to my social as a contractor. Now, I cannot take you through the tax law. That's my understanding.
It's tax filing status. It's just a difference between how your taxes are treated. As a W-2 employee, you know they're taken out. As a 1099, you're responsible for those, and you'll do quarterly payments, or you can do them faster than quarterly as well. So it's just a difference in your filing status.
I think that takes us, that's a great point, right? So like when you're starting a business, and say you're starting off as a journalist, and then you're becoming an entrepreneur, you so often have to play more roles than just a content creator, right? You're also your accountant, a lot of times you're your CFO, there's some legal questions that need to be answered. So what prepared you to wear all of the hats that are required to be a journalist, or how did you know when you needed to ask for help?
I knew I needed help in the beginning. I probably took too long to ask for some of the help, but I knew what some of my gaps were. I still don't wear all the hats, and in fact, I'm at the point of taking more of the hats off my head now. So I'm at the point of learning to scale my business, which means less of the work, much less of it is done by me. Most of it is done by my team. So one of the first and best things I did was hire an accounting firm, right? So that the dollars and the tracking would be accurate. And I did that years ago before I ever hired employees. I think the training as a journalist, asking the right questions, doing enough research so you know the path to go down. One of the best things that I did was a professional association I joined specific to solo PR agency owners, so individual PR owners. And I asked that group, how do you do your billing? How do you track this? And I'm still using some of the tools that they use. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Ask people who've done it before and get that off of your shoulders. So asking the right questions, research, again, you're probably gonna hear that over and over again. Another thing that prepared me to wear all of these hats, I realized looking back, even why I liked being a daily journalist. I love to learn new things. I love to move quickly. I love to process a lot of information. I'm curious. I like ideation. That is very helpful as a business owner. Solve problems, solve them quickly, be able to read up on a company that you're gonna talk to this afternoon, spend an hour on that this morning and be ready for that. You all are doing that all the time, and that prepares you to put on that hat, that networking hat, that sales hat, that managing people hat, that HR hat, just by what you do every day, being able to apply that to different topics.
I would second that because it was definitely those journalistic skills, and then the experience at a particular job I had at the beginning of my career as a local editor at Patch.com. It used to be owned by AOL.com. I know nobody remembers AOL. Okay.
I love it.
No,
remember
please
that.
don't tell me you still have an AOL email address. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you like that. Okay, you have a Gmail. I wasn't even sure that AOL.com still worked, honestly.
It does.
Okay, but I worked for that company as a local editor. I founded the Evergreen Park Patch, which is here on the south side of the Chicago area. And as the local editor, you manage a team of freelancers. You have to make sure they're paid. You assign them assignments. You're an editor, a real deal local editor. In addition, you're juggling also going to city council meetings and covering things yourself. And so that experience directly prepared me for something like this. Now, I will say that my business is very much structured about, okay, what I'm thinking about today is what is it about my business that I can do, what I can make money off of without me physically being present. Because it's very much based off of my unique talents and skills. Like literally the things that I was doing for free, I've now monetized them. But it was me doing them, it wasn't a team doing them. So I think about that daily, about, well, what tasks can I outsource when it comes to this? Whether or not, you know, voiceover kicks up to a level that I don't have time to edit them. Maybe I have an editor, or maybe I have, you know, someone, since I do media training, I have someone curtail the training to a specific client for me before I then go in and train the client, or whether far off it turns into an agency of multiple voices, and then I'm able to help people that way. I'm thinking about those things now, just because what I created was very much based off of me. So that's kind of a different perspective. Definitely have that direct, you know, as being a local editor, that prepared me in a big way to be able to manage people, budgets, and tasks. But I think about the actual business of the business that I'm doing and how can I make sure that it doesn't have to involve me every day, whether it's another stream of income or whatever.
In terms of, I don't remember exactly how you asked the question, but I would say I have an accountant / firm. I have had that for a while. As I mentioned before, I had a company before. I put it in quotes because, you know, it's kind of out of necessity. I ended up folding that company, but my accountant did all the accounting for that as well. Because honestly, I was just, for a while, I was limited, like Renita talked about, on what I could do because I worked for an employer for a while. So I didn't figure out different verticals that I could do or different lanes that I could actually do. Now I know better about, if I were to take, say, a traditional media job again, if I did that, I would never give up my business now. Or I won't say it's, you know, when you say never, you get challenged on that. It would be difficult for me to consider doing that. I would find a way to continue to do that and see what lanes I could operate in, because I do believe nowadays, especially if you want economic freedom, it really helps to have at least 2 streams of income. And a business is, you know, is that, you know, or marriage. Mary Rich, I'm just kidding.
That's the name of the panel, Mary Rich.
Your retirement plan, all.
Of course, a retirement plan.
That
goes without saying.
So, I mean, that's a good point. And if you want to expand on that, when I was really curious when you were saying you didn't approach it the right way the first time. And I also think knowing when to pivot, is also one of those key skills you learn in journalism that is invaluable when it comes to entrepreneurship. So, what were some of those lessons that you learned the first time around that helped you be more successful?
Okay, so I'm in the early days of the second time around, but I think it's just a mental shift. And I don't think I thought outside the box enough about like how I could make this worth it. It wasn't worth it to continue to pay all these taxes because the first time around I established it as an S corp. Now I'm established as an LLC. And so as an S corp, there were just so many taxes I was paying, and I was, I was working by this point as a W-2 employee and just paying taxes on nothing, no income. I couldn't earn, anything based on how I'd approach it. And I would try to get permission to employers. So I would approach things by structuring things differently, basically. And that's how I, and I would operate in different lanes and and carve outs. If I worked for someone, again, I would have carve outs and whatever my contracts were.
And what about if you could go back in time and give, right at the start of considering starting a business, give yourself advice, what would you tell yourself, or what do you wish you'd done differently?
Are you Bernadette, me?
Renita.
Okay. I would say start sooner.
Yeah.
I would say what you have is what you need right now to start right away. That's what I would say.
That's great advice.
And I would say also, figure out how to work this into your work situation ASAP. Because if it's already established and it's already there, there's some wiggle room that you have. And I cannot stress enough that one stream of income is too close to none.
Yeah.
Which can be ripped away at any moment, by the way. So you build something that you own, that you, ladies and gentlemen, this is all about agency. It's about having more agency over your life. That is my thing. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so whatever will give you that agency, whatever will give you that comfort. I would also say this. I did for about a year. I'm a person who, several checkpoints in my career. It was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Has anybody ever felt like that? Okay. So like as a person of faith, I was like, God, you're gonna have to tell me something because if not, I'm leaving without a job. And what I believe my direction was start writing down the things you do well, the things that you love doing, and the things that people ask you for. And I ended up doing that for a year and ended up working with a business coach who was one of my sources. And she showed me how I could turn that list into a business. So I would say one stream of income is too close to none. So number 2, figure out what you can do. What you have is what you need now. And number 3, take note of the things you do well, the things that people ask you for, and the things that you love doing.
That's really good.
Preach.
Amen.
So I would say, from the business standpoint, I would go back and tell myself to think bigger earlier. I was thinking small and just looking for enough work for me. And I really started shifting my thinking about 5 years ago into thinking this is a real agency. The types of work that we have with global corporations, people would love to have. And so we can go up, and one of the signs was we landed a project and the other team pitching it was one of the global PR agencies.
Oh, wow.
And we won that project. Doesn't happen a lot. We got lucky, but then that told me we should be thinking about hiring people, growing it, how do we rebrand it to take my name out of it. I would push myself to do that earlier. I would ask for more help. I tend to be very, very self-sufficient, so it's hard for me to ask for help, but I would have benefited from more coaching for how to grow the business. So I'm doing a lot of that now, which is why I'm at 10 years and at this level as opposed to another level. I'm not unhappy about it. I think it's the journey that I've been on, and the way I started, and one of the reasons I started the business, this was helpful. And I will just go on a little bit of a tangent there. Like many women that I've talked to, I started my business at a moment where I had school-age children and a declining parent. And so I was working a media on-call job, going after work to a nursing home, then going home with my family. And so I had an opportunity to start this business. So that's the other reason it took me a long time to grow into this way, because I did want a lot of flexibility, and I created something, and I would say keep that in mind for yourself. I created the type of work environment, flexibility. We've been a remote first firm since 2014 that I wanted. And so you can do that now. People have been doing that for years. And even the work that you all are doing right now, you can probably just do that same work, but you create your environment.
So I just want to underscore again how much respect I have for every single member of this panel. I know this is not everybody's story, but you know, my mother is an employee, my grandmother is an employee, right? So the idea of striking it out on your own is so scary. And I think it's scary for a lot of people. So where did the idea for your company come from? And then what was it that allowed you to take that leap from idea to action? Because so many people don't take that step.
So I will say I had the idea before, but I didn't do anything about it. So sometimes you end up in a situation by force or by choice. I want to echo something Renita said about seeking another stream of income. And it seems like, I would think that everyone in the room is here because you're interested in owning a business, being an entrepreneur or something like that. So I agree with her, just start until, because you don't want it to be by force. Because I do think for this time around, it's by force. Again, I'm gonna go back to the faith thing for me. Do I think God wanted this for me before? Yes, but I didn't do anything about it. So do it by choice before it's by force, because I've been laid off, I've had a contract end, and when you're in that situation, now what? I knew it wasn't the employee route. Not that I wouldn't take a traditional job, but I don't even see, if I did take another one of those, I don't see very much more of that in my personal future, because now I know more of what my vision is, So, I don't see the long road, which is scary to say because I kind of look at myself as an unexpected entrepreneur, is the non-traditional path in media, especially because I like my personal finance work as well. I like both.
So my idea for starting the company was that I really had a job that I really, really loved. And then we moved halfway across the country, and it was not possible to do that job where we were moving. I loved being able to bring all of those skills together. I was sometimes working with media, sometimes working on employee communication, sometimes working events, a little bit of social media. I love things that move very fast and to use all of those skills at one time. And so I decided to do that for other organizations and see where that would get me. And that's really the genesis of the idea.
Okay, well mine is, I told you the first part of it, which is that I wanted more agency over my life. We've all seen the stories, heard the stories of how quickly people can get booted out of this industry, whether or not it's by their own, decision. It could be by force or by choice. And I definitely wanted, like I said, to insulate myself against that. But I also wanted to do something different. I had recently, in the past 5-6 years, become aware that people have several different careers in their lives sometimes, and it's okay. We're not as, monotonous, monolithic, whatever you would like to say, people just don't do that anymore. And I am personally interested in using up every single gift that I have. And then this part got me, guys. The fact that, guess what? You don't have to do those other things all the time, that you don't really do that well. I kind of grew up with the mindset of don't take the easy road out, do all the hard things. But when I was hosting a personal finance show and I met people who figured out how to create businesses out of the things that they love, I couldn't unlearn what I learned, and I was legit like, why not me? And so I gained this irrational faith that I could do the same thing, if not, more, and just continuing to surround myself with people who had done it, really, really fed that truth for me. So that's where I am now, irrational faith.
So what would you just say to someone who does not have that irrational faith?
That's a good
Someone
question.
who has an idea, but maybe they're scared to kind of go out on their own.
Get the data. Look at what the data is for whatever you're trying to start. See how much it costs, like what it looks like the kind of entry cost would be for that field. Set yourself off. You talked about this before, Imani. Just a reserve to be able to support yourself, a cushion. Yes, you talked about the stats about how often Black businesses more self-funded than other businesers. There is a reason for that. Yes, we should seek capital, but capital is hard to come by for Black businesses. The facts are there. So put yourselves in the room where you can access that capital, but keep the knowledge that statistically speaking, you may have to do some self-funding on your own. So set that money aside, see what the numbers are for the type of business that you're planning to start. Some businesses require low capital to start. You don't need much to start it.
Absolutely, and I would say, there's nothing indicating that we aren't afraid. Sometimes you're gonna have to do it afraid. I'm still doing that. But again, having a reserve, doing your research, starting small if you need to, starting part-time, and keep in mind, and I meant to say this before, some of the most incredible professionals I know have had businesses and started them and gone back into full-time roles and gone back into their business. So to your point, it's not a one and done. You started a business and you can't stop doing that in 2 years. Do the thing that works for you, and it may work for you for 2 years or 20 years.
Yeah, I think this is such a good question because practically I was dead scared, you guys. In fact, I have a signature talk on fear that you guys can check out on my website. However, how I got through that fear was taking closer steps toward it, right? So practically what that looked like was I'm not ready to launch out on my own, but knowing that the jobs that I had traditionally in journalism did not allow you to make money outside of the company. I know that I wanted to save up a chunk of my expenses. So not just the business expenses, but my personal expenses, my budget, how much money it costs to be Renita for at least 3 to 6 months. Your emergency fund, if you will, if you listen to personal finance experts like Diane King Hall and myself. And so I wanted to make sure practically, number one, I could save up some money with my expenses, and not just that, but money for my business, because I did calculate the cost of how much it would cost to get voiceover equipment for myself. But number two, for me, I needed an intermediary. I was too afraid to just jump. So I accepted a job that was not 100% journalism. In fact, it was a bank that owned a network, but they allowed me to do projects outside of the company. So that was my bridge over to being able then to be full-time on my own.
And this question I'll put to you specifically, Renita, because I had originally asked, fun fact, I had originally asked Renita to be the moderator of this panel, but if you want to talk about steps being ordered, that didn't work out, and you're welcome. Yeah, part of the reason I wanted you to be a part of this panel so badly was because having worked with you, I know that you've had an entrepreneurial mindset with every single job that you've had. Working at Reuters, she started her own show. I won't spoil too many details of what happened with that, but can you talk about how, anyone, even if you do have a regular 9 to 5, I'm sorry, there's no such thing as 9 to 5 in journalism, but
I know.
How can anyone benefit from having an entrepreneurial mindset?
I love this question. Thank you. It's because I created something called like careerpreneurship, okay? All right, shameless plug, that is one of my signature talks.
I was gonna say it needed to be if it's not.
Right, but it's about navigating your career with business acumen. But it's also about finding opportunities along the way. And so my job, my desire was to get the local television job. Out after Medill, I wanted to be a local TV reporter, and I wanted to work my way back to Chicago and be on ABC7 or WGN. Okay, y'all, that never happened. In fact, I applied for like 200 jobs and only got rejection letters from about 7. That was pretty, I used to carry them around in my backpack, right? I vowed that, you know what, there are other ways to do this. And so at every job that I went at, I started a show. And I learned that in grad school because at the time they were like, yeah, this digital thing is taking off. It's all about multimedia journalism, you know? And so I was sold on the fact that, yeah, some stories are good as either print or audio or video. And I just created things where I went. And that offered me a couple of things. I was able to, and I teach this in my careerpreneurship workshop, I was able to add value to the company with a new product that was not already there, okay? And number 2, I created a lane for myself with something that could not be compared to anything else that anybody else had. So since it was not a rule book for what I did, you know, at review time, you can't go, you know, there's no measuring book, you know. But, you know, at the next review time, I made sure to make it better than last year or that last quarter or whatever else. I hope I actually answered that question. I kind of went off on a tangent there. But it was important to me then, from then on, to create. And so what Imani is referring to, it's funny how we got to Gold Watch. So I was covering the commodities market at Reuters in New York City. It got a little boring for me, I'll be honest. The content was very, it's only a few reasons why gold moves in the gold market. It could be geopolitical turmoil, it could be because of the price of the US dollar, and a couple of other things. But I was interested in, you know, what other people were interested in about gold, about this commodity. And at the same time, and I can say this now because it was quite funny, I was at NABJ that year, I met with CNBC, and I was gonna do a screen test with them. So I needed to practice every day. So I ended up doing every day, uploading a video of here's where the gold market went and here's why it did it, you know? And was kind of told, hey, you know, you need support to do that. You can't just do that on your own. That's understandable. You can't just go rogue, but I didn't know that, you know? But my managing editor was like, hey, listen, the TV team might want to do something with this, you know? They're not gonna be able to do it every day, but, you know, maybe weekly. And I said, okay, good, let's try it out. So I talked to the TV team, and they're like, hey, guess what? You made me like gold. Why don't we try this concept? And it turned into Gold Watch, hashtag Gold Watch, which explored the alternative uses of gold. So people would send me things from, you know, all over that, you know, the Perth Mint, they made a Christmas tree that was made out of 2018 gold coins, right? It was a story that I found on, at the time the royal wedding was about to happen, right? And so the World Gold Council, it releases every quarter the figures of gold. So like what happened in gold jewelry sales, what happened in gold bar sales, things like that. And so what I found out was that when Harry proposed to Meghan with a yellow gold ring, it sparked a resurgence in yellow gold sales. So I spun that story like 3 different ways. I did it in print, I also did it for the TV product, and then it was part of my Gold Watch show series, which, and so here's the funny thing about it, y'all, like, I'm not even sure what the thought was with marketing Gold Watch, but it started out on being put on weekends on the Reuters TV Twitter page. People aren't really looking for commodities news on the weekends. You know, I didn't pay attention to when it was being published. But because it was kind of unique, it started out getting like 3,000 views on the weekend. I'm like, okay, Mama, I made it, right? And it went up to 10,000, and then like 50,000 and 80,000. And then the executive editor, Dan Colarusso, who's now a VP at CNBC, he goes one day, "You're gonna make me rich." And I'm like, "Can I get a cut?" And you know, it doesn't work that way. And he started selling advertising around the product, and it started to make like 250,000 views every weekend. And so that's what caught the attention of Bloomberg TV, who then recruited me, and I joined that team the next year. But that was just, that was based off of me being bored and, wanting to flex that skill by any means necessary. I've had other jobs where I'm going off on a tangent, but I've had other jobs where I've created shows, and I can tell you about that later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great example of how you can have an entrepreneurial mindset even if you are a W-2 worker, if you're an employee. I could go on and on forever, but just one more question for me, and then I'll kick it out to the audience. So get your questions ready. But how can the people in this room support you?
Follow my podcast, Your Money Call. Go on Spotify. Y'all got your phones. Bring out your phone right now. Spotify, Apple, whichever is your preferred platform. Your Money Call. It's my podcast. Follow me on Instagram as well. The numbers help with monetization of something like that. When you're still working in the media space, the numbers help. So that's how you can support me. Share it. So follow, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff.
And you can connect with
And Diane King Hall is my handle on Instagram.
And you can connect with all of our panelists by scanning that QR code. You'll see their emails, their Twitters, their LinkedIn's, all of that.
So I will say, and I'm based in Atlanta, and of course I run a PR firm. So one of the best things you can do to support us is to write about us and write about our clients. We love sourcing. I even help journalists source for stories even when the person I'm connecting them to is not an actual paid client. I would rather have the networking moment and help you solve that than to say, hey, I don't know anyone in that field. For instance, we represent the National Medical Association. So if any of you cover the business of healthcare stories, we can source physicians. They're the oldest and largest association of Black physicians in the country across any of those specialties. Reach out to us to write about our business. Our network is very large. So if you come to me and say, hey, we don't want to write about a PR firm, but we'd love to find a diverse-owned construction firm, I probably have a list of half a dozen to connect you with and would love to do that because we do a lot of work focused on building up entrepreneurs. So include us in your stories, use us for network. I'm never going to say, hey, I'm not going to do that because I don't have a paying client. And send people to us. The other thing I will say is, very often in my experience as a business owner, the companies that hire us, the organizations that hire us, think of us differently. They think of us to do their DEI and multicultural work, which we do, and I see the importance of, and we have an expertise in that. We also are a strategic communications firm with probably 70 combined years of corporate communications experience that is not just in those areas. So in your stories, I know you all will think of this. Talk to us about just your business stories, but talk to companies. They should be working with more diverse-owned small businesses and not just putting us in a pigeonhole to do certain types of work. And then also, quite frankly, y'all, coming to us and saying, can you reduce this price?
That's good. Okay, quick question. How many of you are part of employee resource group workshops at your job? A couple? Okay.
This is the employee research.
Join your ERGs and then suggest me to come and speak to your ERGs. Because I do think that my signature talks are very unique. They're really interactive and fun, but people do walk away with a better concept of a better idea of what careerpreneurship, what I mean when I say that. I do have a talk called Mind Over Money, Creating Mental Financial Resilience and Smart Spending Habits. And then I also have a talk on fear, which is transcendent of audience. That's the one I'm building a brand around, actually, because fear stops us from doing a lot. And a lot of us could benefit from understanding how to work through fear. So that's the first thing you can do for me. The second thing, yes, the second thing you could do is follow me on Instagram, because I'm going to start putting out more content on there, more specialized content on Instagram. And I'm at Renita D. Young. Thanks.
Okay, great. I did see one question in the back, and then we'll come to you. Yes, but just speak up. Yeah.
Sure, Alicia Stewart. I wanted to ask you actually, I have a question for you, Imani. Thanks for putting together this panel. Can you speak specifically, so much is told about like Black women on the highest, launchers of business, and they're also like the least kind of like funded from VC, private equity, et cetera. So can you talk about what you found in your reporting on business are the alternative sources of capital that more Black entrepreneurs should be going for, that are maybe underlooked or not necessarily served. And then for the rest of the panel, I think you guys added so much great gems, and I really appreciate you sharing vulnerably about your past. I'm really curious to hear about, in the same ways that your stories can be influenced by like our subconscious, like shaping of the world, so can our companies. So I'm really curious about the ways in which you continue to kind of like evolve, and whether that's in business coach, et cetera, and to continue to kind of grow and hold yourself accountable as your business grows as well.
Okay, so quickly, in terms of alternative funding sources, tap your networks. If your networks don't have a lot of capital, which, statistically that may be true. The other thing is, if you're considering starting a business, remember this acronym. Oh man, do I remember the acronym? They're these nonprofit lenders. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, I'm gonna look it up, and I'm gonna let these guys. CDFIs, Community Development Funding Institutions. These are nonprofit lenders. And a lot of times, so if you remember George Floyd, 2020, all of these banks, I'm gonna lend $1 billion to the Black community. They didn't do that. What they did was that they cut a check to a whole bunch of what they call CDFIs and said, hey, we're gonna lend you guys money so that you guys can lend to the Black community. Those organizations are specialized in lending to underserved communities, so check those out. They're almost in every kind of neighborhood.
And one of the large organizations that does that is LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation, and they have, I think, 16 offices in the US. So LISC might be a great place to start. And I'm gonna tag in something on that, both on funding for Black women-owned businesses and just the data around us. So NMSDC, the National Minority Supplier Development Council, recently released their economic impact report. This was maybe 6 weeks ago they released it. If you look at the report, and they are a certifying organization, so one of the organizations that companies depend on to certify that a minority-owned company is truly minority-owned. Their data shows that while Black MBEs, minority business enterprises, comprise the largest percentage of their members, we do not receive the largest percentage of contracts. That's for Black businesses as a whole. It holds true when you look at their numbers for Black women-owned businesses. So that's a key stat if you were to do a story about this, to look at that and to ask organizations what they're doing to change that, because we're engaging, we're making the effort, we're starting the businesses, we're getting certified, and we still don't necessarily receive what would be appropriate numbers related to that. The other thing I would say in terms of alternative funding sources, so the CDFIs is great. Some of the organizations that are out there that do capital conferences are useful to go and learn and hear from people in that environment what some of those alternative funding sources are. I'm a member of a fairly new group, the Bow Collective, Black Owners and Women's Group, based out of Washington, D.C., but with more than 200 vetted Black women-owned businesses, many of which have revenue over $1 million. And every year they do a capital conference for Black women-owned businesses. We had it in June in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's just one example.
Can you repeat the name of that?
The Bow Collective, B-O-W Collective.
All right, sorry, you're back there. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Ray Young. I'm the founder of Down to Earth. It's a multimedia company. We do podcasts, newsletters, social media content. So I guess similar model to yours, Diane. So my question is, what are some of the basic checkpoints that a founder would need to have for the business? Is it establishing an LLC? Is it an S corp? What are some of like the basic legal things we need to figure out just to make it official?
you should establish some kind of, like, either an LLC or an S corp out the gate, so that, like, they talked about, you know, kind of a separation of, you, the person, and the entity. So I would say, if you haven't done that already, do that. I can't decide for you whether it's an S corp or an LLC. That's the best thing. It just depends on how you wanted your, you know, your tax treatment to be. I would say definitely talk to an accountant about that and see what kind of is the best structure for you and what you're trying to, you know, kind of get out of it long term, and what protections you're looking for in that respect.
I would add also to meet with an attorney to set that up, so have those folks in partnership. And I know it's hard. We're in your pocket telling you to spend money with them. It is worth it. It's worth it even if you're starting out on your own, and it is doubly, triply worth it if you are doing a partnership.
If you have an attorney in the family, reach out to an attorney in the family. Use the resources you have. One of my sisters is an attorney. She's not necessarily in the field that I need, but she can often give me a baseline, you know, kind of what I should be thinking about and what type of attorney to talk to. So tap into your network. See who in your friends and family circle may have that, may be able to provide the resource for you at, you know, low to no cost. If you're, I'm not saying to, you know, undercut like people's costs, but, you know, just go through your network first to find the resources that you need for like attorney, accountant, etc. to start out.
I have an accountant friend who created a checklist for me. I can send it to you.
Wow, that's good.
Take advantage. Her contact information is at that QR code. And one more thing is that, like, not everybody needs an LLC. You guys have probably heard of LLC Twitter, and there's kind of like, I don't know, that's that statement. But I've also heard stories of a lot of people who spend a lot of money setting up an LLC, and it turns out not to be the right structure. So underscoring what everyone said, talk to someone before you know, invest a whole bunch of money in setting up any of these structures. I saw this hand.
Yes, my name is Kirk Gordy. I'm the founder of Southern Queen Bricks. I have a question for Ms. Young and Ms. Davis. When you created your content, how the intellectual property, was it theirs to keep, or were you able to use it as well? And
So for my talks, it's different than for voiceover work.
no, I mean when you worked for the Gold Watch.
Oh, that was property of the company.
Yeah, right.
I was a full-time employee there. That was property of the company. But for my talks, it's different because I asked for the video for all of my talks. What you have to do is read the contract, because with one particular client, they had a standard of allowing people to use the video on socials for 6 months. I just asked them to change that to in perpetuity, and they did.
And Ms. Davis, you mentioned you didn't think big enough in the beginning. You would have, now you would think bigger. How can a young company think bigger to pitch? What does a company need to scale?
I'll tell you what I'm learning still in terms of needing to scale. So, you know, and I got this question at a session earlier this year. There was a woman who was very frustrated because she was not able to get in the room with, say, JP Morgan Chase and companies like that. Her company was 6 months old. In my experience, those companies, when, you know, you want to be able to pitch, I want to be able to pitch JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, those large companies, but they are also looking at risk mitigation. So your company is a young company, 6 months, 2 years, even 5 years old. A company like that, or let's say it's a consumer product, right? A company like that makes their first order to you, let's say it's Public Stores, and you're selling a food product, and they want it, and they think they can sell it, and they make their first order. One of the things I learned, and I learned this before I started my business, a company like that can easily bankrupt a small company. They make that first order, and you know, we don't sell a product, but it's 50,000 units, and you're used to producing 5,000 units a month. But they're not gonna pay you for 90, 120. There's a big story about a company in Texas that was looking for video production agencies, and the literal payment terms were 364 days.
That's insane.
They do not want to work with a small agency. They set that up so that they wouldn't have to. And it was a large account, millions of dollars. You're not gonna get paid for a year. That will shut a small company down. So it's thinking through, do I have the legal coverage, the insurance coverage, the financials, or a way to get those financials? So this is part of what I'm being coached on and learning now. Do I have to have those dollars in the bank? Not necessarily, but have I developed the relationship so if we get that contract that we've gone after, that I can make a call and say, hey, we got it. And hey, I need $500,000 so that I can hire this many people and I'm not gonna be able to pay it back for 6 months. So it's things like that that you need to think about to scale, and I'm definitely not an expert on it. I'm a part of multiple programs so that I can learn, but it's those kind of things so you don't have to shut the doors and so that you're ready to go in those rooms, can have those conversations, because those large companies, as soon as they can see that you're not quite ready, that may be your last chance to talk to them, maybe not, but they're looking for that kind of track record, which is why it's so hard. You have to build, and that's why getting that first big Publix thing helps you get into Kroger, to Target, to Walmart. But they don't wanna be the first to take the risk. And then people in procurement, they are actually using their internal social capital to bet on a new company. If they have been buying cereal from this one distributor for 20 years, adding a new cereal, I mean, we have most of us probably been employed at some point. Do you wanna be the person who takes that risk? If it is a huge win and the new cereal is the next Frosted Flakes, yeah, you wanna be that person, but you don't know.
And I was mentioning back to CDFIs, all of them, they have something called TE, Technical Education. So not only are they nonprofit lenders, they also provide training for entrepreneurs. So you can learn some of the skills that Bernadette was just talking about. We are officially out of time. I mean, I'm happy to stay until they kick us out. I'm not sure about our panelists, but I do want to make sure they get their due. Can we please have a round of applause for our panelists?
Thank you all.
Still going?
I saw there are a couple questions. I don't know if this room has to turn over
Yeah.
to, does this room have to turn over to?
I don't know. I said we can stay until they kick us out, but I just want to make sure people start walking out.
Yeah, go ahead over here. You may four.
Oh,
Okay.
It's 2:36.
Okay.
All right, two more questions. This one, that one, and then we're done.
I was trying to, I was like, let me think about
All right.
that.
So my name's Corey Chambers. I'm a journalist in New York City, also a baby entrepreneur. Just starting out a business, and I'm curious. Obviously, friends and family, great place to start as you're starting a business. But I'd love to hear from each of you as you took it to that next level of people you don't know. This is a new client, a straight up new client, a new connection that becomes a client. I'd love to hear those stories as to where you took the business to that next level.
That's a good question. I feel like I'm in the middle of that story right now, because I've been having different kinds of conversations at NABJ. So on the media training part of my business, I learned that some PR companies, some communications companies don't want to be the ones to tell their clients, if you say that, it's going to make you sound like an idiot. They don't want to ruin the relationships, but they'd rather bring someone else in to media train that specific thing. So I'm learning different ways to spin my business in the moment as I'm here, and just the different conversations that I hope that helped explain a little bit there. Okay.
I think just use your network. So that's what my approach has been, using my network. I have had people who've known me for years reach out to me. So for instance, I have done work at the New York Stock Exchange over a good portion of my career in news. So I know executives there. I'm friends with an executive there. She referred me to a corporation to do work for them. I did not know that man. So I think warm contacts are the best. Like, and your network knows your reputation. They'll put their name out there on your behalf. So I think that's the best way. I'm not saying don't cold call or send cold emails or anything like that. But a warm client is easier to convert than a cold client.
That's good.
Agree, and I think the other thing to think through is a lot of people, and we are a B2B company, so it's a different thing. Friends and family would not have worked. I don't really have family members who could hire us to do what we do. So it's primarily people I used to work with. So I got a call 1 year after starting my company. A former colleague said, hey, I'm looking for a freelancer for this, but it looks like you do this now. We worked with that company for 8 years. And so that was incredible. And so those are the references, the referrals that help. A lot of people, when I make the list of where we have gotten our referrals, 80% of them came from people I used to work with when I was a full-time employee. Now, the scaling piece, you asked the question about scaling, that's another component of scaling. How do we scale past my network? My network has grown, but now we're doing more things that are productizing, developing products and services, and to get to the point where we can hire a salesperson to sell us, because there are companies I don't have a contact in who are hiring the Golans and the Fleischman-Hillards, and we can do that work. So we want to get to the point where someone is making that connect for us, and we're getting in those rooms even if we don't have a direct referral. So that's the beginning of the journey, and then the next step is to get to people who can get you in the room based on your reputation, based on the work you do.
All right, last question back there.
Hi, Douglas Price. I'm a emerging freelance business writer, but a couple of things I heard that triggered me because my main job is 25 years as a corporate tax compliance professional, and as far as LLC is concerned, you do that more so to protect your assets and what you have, so that they're distinguished from whatever you're doing. If somebody wants to come after you and sue you, they'll sue the LLC, but not you. Also, as far as things like partnerships and the like, I mean, other associated things that are tied to that are partnership agreements and what they say. So definitely reach out to a tax compliance professional for those specific details, because articles of incorporation are going to vary from whatever state that you're in. So definitely look into those avenues. And the QR code, it had names, but not any specific email or anything.
They're toggles. They're toggles. Okay. Sorry, I'll take this question.
Oh, thank you. So I write, or I'm a speechwriter for a large organization, but I do some speech writing on the side under my company, Pivotal Moment Media. My question is, and I think Renita mentioned it about turning sources into clients. How do you navigate that space if the skill that you are doing is also what you're still doing for your employer? So if you're like posting on LinkedIn, like I'm available for this, but you are also still doing that in your main 9 to 5. How do you do that and still build your business while still working your job?
I did it, to be honest. Wow.
And did it well. Thank you.
Well, no, I did not.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I did something adjacent to it that was not a conflict of interest. I didn't really do specific things that were exactly what I was doing at work for the purpose. It's hard to explain, Nikita. You know why? Because the function of the job I didn't do for clients, but some of those elements I did do for clients. So I'm not going out creating financial content for anybody else.
Gotcha.
Right now.
I would say try and do like carve outs, and if you have like contracts with your employer or whatever, if there's some legal language that you have with them, see what your carve outs are. If you didn't do this, just look at the what's that called, business standards, and see what's allowed and what's not allowed, and just be careful so that you don't cross the line of conflict of interest.
Right.
And then going forward, you can establish carve-outs. Meaning, do you know what carve-outs are?
I was waiting for that explanation.
So carve-out is meaning like you have a contract with whoever is your employer, if you have a traditional employee or relationship, and you have a carve-out that says, meaning, I can do this.
it's just an at-will employment situation, so I don't have a contract.
Okay.
I'm just an at-will
Okay.
employee,
There's
so.
always a contract. There's always a
Oh, really?
contract.
Not
Yeah.
just,
I've
okay,
signed something to work there.
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
making checks.
okay,
So then
okay.
just check your business standards, like there will be a business standards workbook that you got and see what the wiggle room is to make sure you're not exposed. And, you know, and just be careful on it, and if you think maybe you are exposed, just be prepared for your, you to make the choice of your off ramp versus them
Yeah.
making the, the choice of your off ramp. So
Okay.
just, I'm not saying don't do it because I love the idea of, people in this room building more streams of income. And if you find that, okay, maybe this is walking the line too closely, figure out a different way that you can do your business, a different way that you can bring in revenue that won't be a conflict of interest.
Okay,
Can I add, I'm sorry, you just made me think of something. So like, I couldn't do the business of it, but I found something that still helped raise my profile in that industry. So briefly, for instance, the standard as a business journalist is you can't do anything that makes you sound like a personal finance expert. If you're a fool, so you can't suggest, you can't say you're giving advice, you can't give financial advice, but it is education.
okay,
That is a standard thing for a financial journalist. This is not advice, this is education.
Unless you are a CFO.
Unless you are.
Unless you have a certification.
Unless you
you
have a
do.
certification. I didn't have my certification, and I couldn't be seen as an expert, but I could interview experts. So that's what I did instead, and that helped raise my profile in the personal finance community. So that's what I mean when I say something adjacent to it. Maybe it's not that you are helping others with speech writing, but maybe, I don't know how to spin it, but also maybe you can, so I'm not sure what the standards are, but go with the standards.
okay. Thank
So
you.
I can't speak to doing it while you have the job, but once you figure that out, I would love to know more about your speech writing. It's one of the things that
Oh.
we do, and I'm a former executive speechwriter, but I can no longer be the person writing the speeches. I don't have the time.
Oh, well, here we go. All right, we'll talk. All right.
One more round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
It was.
You can come and talk to us. We don't bite.